Grace and peace, beloved of God. I am Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson, and I'm here with another broadcast from Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. We are a domestic violence awareness um, entity that is headquartered in the United States. We have a mandate to address domestic violence and the horrific impact that it has on society at large and mankind in particular on a global basis. So we're talking worldwide. I am the CEO of Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative, and I'm also the founder and the visionary for Lion of Judah Global Impact Ministries. And so every week we come to you with a new video, with new information regarding domestic violence and its many, many layers because it's a multi layered, complex set of circumstances. But this week, we're going to be talking to you about the victim's dilemma. The victim's dilemma. Do I stay at home or do I go to a shelter? But before we get into our topic, I want you to look down here. Somewhere down here, there is a button that says subscribe. I want you to click on subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like and to comment during this presentation. And don't forget to share. Make sure you click the bell so that you are notified whenever we have a new upload or whenever we go live. And so, again, my name is Cheryl Richardson, and we're going to be talking about the domestic violence victim's dilemma. The victim's dilemma. Do I stay home or do I go to a shelter? So let's look at this. A domestic violence victim, whether it's male or female, because anyone can be a victim and anyone can be an abuser, must first come to the realization that what they are doing is not working, that they're not able to appease the abuser, that they're not able to keep peace at home, that they're not able in the mind of the abuser to do anything right, and that things are getting steadily worse. Sadly, it's often once the children begin to display indicators that they're being negatively affected by the violence, or once they become targeted by the abuser, um, that the victim determines that it's time to exit the situation. This can take weeks, months, and years. And what happens while they're embroiled in this situation is that trauma bonding is occurring, which makes it very difficult for a victim to leave. Okay. We talk about trauma bonding. We also have another video regarding why they don't just leave here on our YouTube channel. So please take a few minutes after this presentation and check out our library. Okay. So let's look at this. First, they have to overcome within themselves the resistance to the whole idea that this relationship that they've placed all of this hope and this confidence and these dreams that they have attached to this other human being, that they are not going to manifest as they had hoped. And not only are they not going to manifest, that it has turned into a proverbial hell on earth. And so coming to grips with that and acknowledging that and understanding that you've come to the end of yourself and that there's absolutely nothing that you can do to bring this relationship to a healthy place is a difficult step for many victims. And even once they come to that conclusion, they may be at a loss in terms of what to do next, what should be their next steps. Um, and being isolated from their support system, which many are, being isolated from resources, which many are, because isolation is a key component of domestic violence, that the people that care about you, that love you, don't have full disclosure from you regarding the way that you're being treated, the behaviors that you are enduring, the things that are being said to you as a victim. And so the first challenge is overcoming the shame and the embarrassment and accepting that this situation is incredibly unhealthy and I need to leave. And then you're confronted with, well, what do I do next? And so, for someone who may be watching this, um, know that there are resources available now that were not available, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that there are entities like um, the hotline.org, which is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. There is domesticshelters.org, which is a very, very good resource for trying to find a shelter in your area if you're in need of going to a shelter. And they service the United States and Canada as well. So once a victim realizes that they're being horribly impacted negatively. Maybe they're not able to concentrate at work. Maybe they've been forced to leave their job. They are lying to family members. They're lying to their support system concerning what is going on within their relationship because they want to protect those loved ones or because they're embarrassed. They may feel stupid. Uh, they may feel as though they're failing as a parent. They may be told by others that they're failing as a parent because they're in a domestic violence situation and they have those children in the situation with them. But once they get past that and they decide that they're going to leave, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of having a safety plan. Victims need a safety plan. You need a safety plan, even if you're in a really bad relationship and you determine that you're going to stay in it. You need a safety plan to better ensure that you can live under those circumstances. And the safety plan needs to be revisited periodically to make pertinent adjustments as needed, um, as changes occur in the relationship, as things become more intense, because they invariably will. Okay. And so if you're planning to stay, you need a safety plan to stay safe, just in case things get really bad and you need someone to help you. At the very least, you need a code word that you can use with loved ones or support systems so that they understand that you need help. And the code word should indicate to them, it should represent to them what specifically it is you want them to do. Now, once you decide that you're going to leave, then you need a safety plan that incorporates your exit from the abusive relationship. And if you've already left, then you need a safety plan to better ensure your safety after the fact. The period 30 to 90 days after exiting an abusive situation is incredibly dangerous. The victim and loved ones are in a heightened state of danger because of the rage and the frustration and the anger, the misplaced anger of the abuser. And I'd also like to add that if in your case the abuser is incarcerated, understand that 30 to 90 days after their release is an intense period of time for them. And so you need to be cognizant of your own safety under those circumstances as well. So it's not just about what's going on in your life 30 to 90 days, what's going on in their life in 30 to 90 days. Okay. Um, so after you're gone, and so let's say that you've been out of an abusive situation and it's been years, you still need a safety plan. You need a safety plan because you don't know what the mental status is of your former partner. Okay. And so I just wanted to reiterate that. Now, what might be some barriers to someone who has even has even contemplated going to a shelter? You know, I asked the question in our closed Facebook group. We have a faith-based group, and it's a private group, and it's called Dominion Over Domestic Violence. And the Lord has mandated that we keep it small so that we can ensure the safety of the participants and protect their privacy. But I did ask them about some topics that they thought it would be beneficial for the public at large to learn about regarding domestic violence. And one of our warriors indicated that we should talk about shelter. So that's why we're talking about this today, because I thought it was really a good idea. And when she mentioned it, she was talking about it from the perspective of what shelters should be like. Um, and so people, victims, depending on where they are in life and what they've experienced and what they're accustomed to, have certain expectations. And sometimes they may feel that they're entitled to certain things because that's the way they've always lived, or that's because, you know, they're accustomed to maybe having an affluent lifestyle. And this individual shared, and I appreciate her candor, but she shared that the reason that she chose to stay at that time and not go to a shelter is because they lived in a fairly affluent community, and she was accustomed to having certain things. And the idea of going into a community or a neighborhood that was less than what she was accustomed to, maybe wasn't as financially affluent, maybe didn't feel as safe, um, caused her to stay in that situation as opposed to going to safety. And I think that really is a good example, and I appreciate her sharing it, but it's a very good example about how our preconceived notions can keep us from accessing the help that we actually need. Okay. And so people who live in affluent areas of town, who live in mansions, can be victims of domestic violence, and they can be abusers as well. And someone who is living in a pup tent in a park at night when everyone has gone home can also be a victim or a perpetrator of domestic violence. All right. And so just wanted to share that because that, you know, when she shared with me that that was the reason that she had stayed in her situation. And she said, I know it's shallow, right? I'm going to call it shallow because I know that you won't. I understand that we make decisions based on our own value system. We assign a definition to things based on our own value system. But what's very telling about choosing to remain in an abusive situation because you're concerned about the neighborhood that you'll be in, or you're concerned that you'll be in close quarters with others, or it's not an affluent section of town, you'll be dealing with a different caliber of person, is that we are placing more value on things and status and appearance than our own physical health, welfare, and safety. And so that's something to be considered. And it's an excellent example of how trauma can really affect the brain because trauma rewires our brain. And when it does, it makes it difficult for us to make rational decisions because you've got these hormones being secreted in your brain and they are pretty much unregulated. Okay. So, challenges facing someone who's considering going to a shelter, understanding that they've shared their life with a person who has betrayed them in the most egregious way, that they had hopes of building a future and a life with this individual, and in fact now their life is in danger. Their very life, their physical life, is in danger. Their emotional health is in danger. Their physical health is in danger, and their spiritual health is also in danger. And so accepting that they've chosen, this is the person that they chose, and this is how things have turned out. So that's a tremendous hurdle. Then getting over the hurdle of our expectations regarding what help should look like when it arrives, okay? Um, and understanding that we may have to accept help from a place that's we consider beneath us, like a shelter, because at least there we can stay alive. We can remain alive in order to rebuild our lives, right? Okay. Before going into a shelter, a victim will make a phone call, call a hotline, call a shelter directly, and end up going through somewhat of an intake or an interview of some sort to determine if they are an appropriate placement for that shelter and the services that it provides. So, another hurdle would be having this conversation and kind of bearing your soul to someone who is a complete and total stranger and letting them know about how you've been treated, what your fears are, what your needs are, what your children may need. And so that's another hurdle that you would have to get over, kind of swallowing your pride a bit and being transparent so that you can receive the level of help that you so desperately need at that time. Okay. Another obstacle when going to a shelter might be the rules that are employed at that particular shelter. Some shelters may have a rule that if you have male children, they cannot be over a certain age. Some shelters may have a rule that if anyone in your party has a criminal history, they cannot be admitted. Some shelters may say that if there's an active substance abuse issue or gang involvement, um, any illegal activity, then they are not able to come to the shelter because they would jeopardize the safety and the welfare of other shelter residents. So these are all hurdles. Another hurdle would be that if their domestic violence has turned physical, certainly, and if the children have witnessed this, or if the children have been victimized themselves, um, then that's a reportable situation. And shelters are mandated reporters. Shelters are mandated reporters. Okay. Um, so that might raise concerns about child custody. And certainly, if the abuser is affluent or influential in the community, um, is an attorney, is a police officer, is a bishop, is a pastor, is a Sunday school teacher, is well respected, is a scout leader, someone that people have looked up to in the community, then it may make it difficult for the victim. And this is a concern that they have in terms of retaining custody of their children if they are residing in a shelter. Another concern they may have is, how long can I stay at this shelter? Can I stay for 3 days? Is it a week? Is it 14 days? Is it 30 days? And then what? What happens after that? Who's going to help me? Is there transitional housing after that? What if I'm not safe here in the area and I need to leave the area? Will you help me leave the area? What kind of resources do I have access to if I come into the shelter? Because many victims fear that if I go into a shelter and I can only stay a week, or if I can only stay 2 weeks and then my time is up, what happens after that? If I'm forced to go back home, it's going to be worse than it was when I left. And so that is a concern that they have. Um, and also, some shelters may have rules regarding how many times you're able to be a resident at the shelter, or how much time needs to have elapsed before you return to the shelter. And it's important, I think, for shelter providers to keep in mind the dynamics regarding the cycle of abuse and domestic violence. Statistically, it's not unusual, on average, for a woman to leave 7 times before she leaves and stays away from the abuser before she fully and completely severs that relationship with the abuser. So, this is all a part of the dynamics around domestic violence and around trauma bonding and the psychological impact of it. And it's important for providers of services to be sensitive to that. One of the things that I've done previously is I was a shelter director in a large city here in the United States, and I did that for 4 years. And I learned a lot while I served in that capacity, and it caused me to be more sensitive to what people are actually struggling with and going through. And so I found it necessary to kind of retrain my staff regarding even the shelter rules. We had rules in terms of chores, and we had rules in terms of people watching their children, and we had all these rules. And you need rules when you have a group of people together, certainly who haven't lived together or grown together or even know each other, so that you can have some semblance of order and a safe and clean environment. But it becomes a bit much if enforcing the rule becomes the goal as opposed to actually assisting and helping the resident. And so I can give you an example from the shelter that I directed. We had rules regarding what time that the residents needed to get up, and rules regarding who would cook and who, they had chores that were assigned that had to be done by a certain time. And all of this makes sense, right? Because you're running this facility and things need to run in order. You've got all these different families kind of thrown in together and everyone doing the best that they can. But I noticed that in a particular instance, there was this woman who came in, and in her history, the abuser would not let her sleep through the night. He would wake her up out of a sound sleep and he would fight with her. He might physically assault her. He would verbally assault her. He would threaten her and intimidate her, gaslight her throughout the night. And so she never got to sleep through the night. And so she came to our shelter and she overslept. And when I got into work, the staff told me that they had given her demerits because she overslept and she hadn't gotten her chores done on time. And the resident was devastated. And when I thought about it, I thought, okay, so She violated a rule, but this is the first night in months that she's been able to sleep through the night without being assaulted. And she's exhausted. And for us to give her demerits and tell her, you can only get X number of demerits before you're asked to leave the shelter, is like this threat hanging over her head. And so, oftentimes when service providers are providing services, and yes, we have rules and regulations and things that we have to follow, we have to be intentional about extending compassion and understanding as well. And so I took her demerits away because I thought it was unfair. And then we sat down and we revisited the rules regarding the shelter and built in some flexibility that allowed people to be human and that allowed them to be recovering from a traumatic event and a tremendous disappointment and a tremendous betrayal from someone that they trusted and that they loved and that they had children with or that they trusted with their own children. Um, because we did not want to re victimize someone who was already horribly victimized. And so I would say to the victim who's gone to a shelter, and maybe it's not a top notch shelter, maybe they mean well, and maybe they're a little short with you, and maybe it's not the cleanest place in the world. You have survived 100% of what the abuser has sent you through. So you're a fighter. You have survived it. You are still here. You can endure whatever you must for a few weeks until you can get on your feet. You can do it. You can do it. And so just be intentional about following the rules as best you can if you're in a shelter. Talk to program staff if you're struggling in particular areas. Ask them if there anything that can be done to take into account your specific circumstances. And even if they come back with the no and the rules are the rules, what we know is that you are a survivor. What we know is that you have a God given purpose and a God given destiny, and that the Lord wants you to walk it out. He wants you to have an abundant life, and that being in the shelter is one step towards you having your autonomy back. And so I want to encourage you on today that if you are in a domestic violence situation, understand that you reach a point where the best thing for you to do is to go so that you can live. But if you don't feel ready to do that, at least get a safety plan, okay? If you subscribe to our blog, it's www.judasroar, ROAR-R.com. You will automatically receive a template for a safety plan. It will be emailed to you automatically. Feel free to reach out to me on social media. You can ask for access to our private Facebook group, Dominion Over Domestic Violence. Um, you can subscribe to the blog. You can hit this button down here, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Explore our channel. We have over 50 videos regarding different topics around domestic violence that we pray will be a blessing to you. Um, If you want to donate, that information is in the description for the video, and you can find it on our social media platforms as well. I am Dr. Cheryl Richardson, an apostle in the Lord's Church, committed to crying aloud and sparing not, and helping as many people as possible worldwide to walk fully in their purpose by igniting hearts, inspiring minds, and safeguarding destinies. We'll be back with you. Thank you for joining us. Make sure that you comment, like, share, and subscribe. Blessings to you.